So the first conversation happens between Jesus and Martha. And we know these guys are buddies because back in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42, Jesus has dinner at Martha Mary's house. Martha's serving, hosting, and Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet listening to him teach her. Martha says, "Make Mary help me." Remember this? And Jesus says, "Mary's chosen the one thing, it won't be taken," all that. So they're friends, they're buddies. So much so that Jesus will make his way, go out of his way, and walk for some days to get to their home because Lazarus, the one he loves, is sick. So when Martha hears that Jesus is coming, Jesus is in the vicinity, she goes out to meet him. And I want you to recognize that the Bible also says that a bunch of Jews had come to their home to comfort Martha and Mary in the loss of their brother, because Bethany was pretty close to Jerusalem. So when Martha hears that Jesus is in the vicinity, she goes out to meet him, and she says to him in verse 21, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." I know that whatever you ask God, he will give it to you. And I recognize, and I think it's really important, because in these conversations with Jesus, Martha and Mary, I would consider, are some of his closest followers. I mean, he has a couple meals with them, and you see kind of the interaction, dialogue. They're some of his closest followers. They're not obviously the 12 disciples, but I mean, Jesus is going to go out of his way to get to their house to, visit Lazarus, as well as eat at their home, all this stuff. Anyways, so Martha says, "If you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask God, he will answer you. He will give it to you." And I like how Jesus responds, because this is, in essence, an interesting conversation. It's a dialogue. And appreciate that not only is there dialogue for the death, that Jesus didn't heal Lazarus, so there's grief there from the loss of Lazarus, and there's also disappointment in Jesus. And so this is a rational conversation, particularly compared to Mary. So Jesus says to her, "Your brother," in verse 23, "your brother will rise again." And Martha said, "I know he'll rise in the resurrection at the last day." And Jesus says, 25, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, yet though he dies, he will live." And so in the midst of this grief and loss, Martha has an interesting conversation with Jesus. And Jesus reveals to her, and you don't see a whole lot of emotion in this conversation. It feels somewhat logical and somewhat rational, if you will, dialogue, using words, interaction, and Jesus revealing to her who he is. And this whole idea of resurrection, Jesus is the one that puts that in the water. So Martha anticipated healing, and Jesus was too late, delayed, delinquent. And I think for all of us in the room online, we have all asked Jesus to do something, intervene, participate, and maybe there was a delay or the window of opportunity closed. Jesus was delinquent. Anybody relate to this? Like a foreclosure, like somebody dies. So that's exactly what she's doing with Jesus. And they're having a relatively rational, non-emotional, you don't read a whole bunch of emotion in this. And I like that, because I think there are many of us in the room online, we're less emotionally organized, and we're more rationally, we think more with our intellect, and less feeling to what we experience. I see that with my kids. One of my kids is particularly very, very rational and kind of logical, and she's not, I don't want to give it away, detached or uncaring. This person is just a little more rational. And one of my kids is a little more emotional. And that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I would propose to you that your best, most authentic self real self is who needs to have the conversations with Jesus. We don't need to be somebody else. Oh, I wish I was more like blah, blah, blah. No. Be who you are for the best conversations with Jesus, your most authentic self.